This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were in the green today. Some positive economic data from China did help to lift a sentiment. But of course, investors are still cautious that the US-China trade tensions will warm up again. Now, MSCI's index of emerging market stocks rose 0.2% on the day, but it is likely to end the week about 1% lower. Meanwhile, South Africa's JSE was firmer despite similar worries. We saw drinks maker Distell announcing that its full-year profit could drop by up to 80% because of the impact of the coronavirus and, of course, a ban on alcohol sales in its home market since March. It is, of course, expected that we'll see similar announcements from other breweries and drinks makers in South Africa. Now, also coming up on today's show, Zimbabwe to introduce a new set of higher denomination banknotes. Kenya now moves towards enforcing a ban on single-use plastics next month. And a DJ in a South African township changes tune from online entertainment to a food drive. Well, let's start off the hour in Zimbabwe, where the Reserve Bank says it will dollar notes, which are set to hit the market next week and the first week of June, respectively. Prior to this, the country's highest cash denomination has been the 5 Zimbabwe dollar banknote. Of course, Zimbabwe has endured a severe liquidity challenge for several years now, and efforts to inject more money into its economy have yielded inflationary outcomes. Now, according to official figures, year-on-year inflation in the Southern African nation eclipsed the 670% mark back in March this year. Well, staying in Zimbabwe, measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 have led to the closure of many businesses in the country. Informal fruits and vegetable markets were amongst the hardest hit. However, some tech entrepreneurs saw an opportunity amidst the crisis and are now helping vendors get customers. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutoya once again with that report.
Imbare is a 2-year-old electronic vendor that delivers fruits and vegetables to your doorstep. It had registered modest growth prior to the lockdown due to a low uptake of electronic commerce here.
People have been very hesitant to onboard this e-commerce, the idea of someone else buying the vegetables for you and delivering them to you. I mean, there's various different reasons, possibly maybe because of living in a third world country. Anything that's gotten off the internet or online is sort of associated with affluence. So a lot of people feel like, oh no, this online business is probably not for my pocket. But with the lockdown, people have been forced to explore it.
The result has been the doubling of volumes that their firm handles.
We're still maintaining the 100% growth rate. Comparing this April, this is May, right? Comparing the May sales and then comparing them to the March sales this time of the month, May is definitely still much, much higher.
Another positive spin-off is the formalization of agriculture, as small farmers turn to retail outlets and distributors following the closure of the main informal vegetable markets.
Farmers would ordinarily be supplying informal markets, now supplying Fresh Grocer, which is a registered company, a registered retailer, and all of a sudden, now they are more bankable and they have a better credit rating, because now they can actually, let's say they want to apply for a loan, they can actually pull up a bank statement which actually shows that they are trading with formal companies.
This isn't the only sector riding the wave. Groceries, fast food, and even bulk water can now be ordered online or via WhatsApp, signaling what could become the trend going forward.
If you look at what is being done worldwide now, you can buy whatever you want online. You can even ask for a service. If you want a plumber, you go and click a service, you get a plumber. If you want an electrician, you go and click a service. There is no more need for human interaction. And as a business, that's what we have put in place. We now have more demands on web development, e-commerce platforms than ever before.
So going shopping won't require you to actually go anywhere. Paying for services won't need physical cash. Quite ideal for a country that faces shortages of both fuel and banknotes. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's head to Kenya now. The country will not seek a debt service standstill under a G20 initiative aimed at helping poor nations weather the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Finance Minister Uche Okoronkwo says the terms of the deal do not suit Kenya's needs. The minister is also concerned about the impact that debt relief might have on Kenya's credit ratings. The group of 20 major economies last month agreed to suspend payment obligations on bilateral debt owed by their least developed counterparts through the end of the year. Now, the goal was to free up more than $20 billion that poor governments could use to support their health services.
Our actions today include a G20 initiative to suspend debt service payment for the poorest countries. All bilateral official creditors will participate in this initiative.
If we accept that position, we may now upset other engagement, other terms of loans, and there are going to be a serious cross-default clause that now will impair us from accessing markets elsewhere. Our inflow of foreign exchange has gone down. They think we might not raise enough, hard currency to make payment, but that's really not the only case. But overall, if you look at the report, the Kenyan debt sustainability analysis, we are very sustainable. Yeah. And Kenyans never defaulted. And we are, up to this time, we have adequate reserve to manage our debt payment for the next 1 year.
And now look at some other headlines for the day. Ghana's central bank has left its key interest rate unchanged. Back in March, the Apex Bank lowered the policy rate by 150 basis points from 16% to 14.5%. Now, this was the first time since 2019 that the Monetary Policy Committee had lowered the rate. Ghana's central bank also expects the West African nation to grow despite the negative economic impact from the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. And Ethiopian Airlines expects a settlement with U.S. plane maker Boeing by the end of June this year, and that's over the crash of a 737 MAX plane. The flight 302 bound for Kenya crashed 6 minutes after takeoff from the capital Addis Ababa. That's in March 2019, and that killed all 157 passengers and crew. Africa's largest carrier is also asking Boeing to compensate it for the accident's impact on its brand. Meanwhile, Morocco's Royal Air Maroc could seek a state loan guarantee in order to help cover June expenses. The loan comes as the state-owned airline struggles with $5 million in daily losses, of course caused by COVID-19. Now, RAM suspended its international flights on March 15th and announced a decision to shut down its domestic flights on March 21st. That's a day after Morocco entered a nationwide lockdown. And China's Southern Airlines is providing a glimpse into measures it's taking to prevent the spread of COVID-19 amongst passengers and staff on flights. Newly released handout videos show staff taking temperatures of boarding passengers, as well as workers disinfecting and wiping down surfaces on the plane. Many of the measures are also laid out in a promotional video that the airline provided to the International Air Transport Association in early April. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let us head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Kenya now moves towards enforcing a ban on single-use plastics next month. And remittances to Egypt seen dropping by up to 20%.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Africa. Now, Kenya's government has allocated about $200,000 to finance removal of plastics in the country's protected areas. And the move comes as the country steps up its war on non-biodegradable materials. Kenya imposed a ban on polythene carrier bags on August 2017. 2 years later, the East African nation banned the use of all single-use plastics in conservation areas. Now, the law goes into effect early next month. It affects the use of plastics in beaches, national parks, forests, and other areas. This means that Kenyans going to the beach or national parks are now banned from carrying water bottles, plastic plates, plastic cups, as well as plastic spoons and forks. Well, let's get the latest on this. We're joined by Karen Boomsma. She is the Director of Sustainable Inclusive Business in Kenya. She's joining us now via Skype. Great to have you on the show with us. Now, a ban on the use of single-use plastics in protected areas, like we mentioned, will come into effect in June. Who will be impacted by this ban? And certainly, what is your take on the debate that the date should be extended given the current situation with the coronavirus?
Hi, thank you for having me in this show. Yes, to respond to the moment of this announced ban, this has been announced a year ago, so we have gotten a year to got prepared. And I think a crisis is always a good moment to rethink and to review your current systems. So I don't think it's necessary to delay, especially because we're actually currently using way more single-use plastics, not the top 10 we're actually banning at the moment, but we are using way more during this crisis for hygiene and protecting reasons. So I think it's actually a good moment. Who will be affected by it is mainly the hospitality, the tourism, and the MICE industry. And yes, that's at this moment that business is really at the standstill. So we will see a different implementation of this ban and a different effect, because we have way less tourists and way less people traveling to the parks. We have hardly anyone going into the parks or at the beaches at the moment.
Well, some are arguing that in order for this ban to stick, the government needs to put together some sort of regulation, of course, backed by the Constitution, and that's in order to ensure that it's effectively implemented going forward. Do you agree with that notion?
Yes, I do agree with that notion, and we have been working collectively, so Kenyan Private Sector Alliance and other private sector bodies have been working collectively with the government to also have the right regulations in place in the new waste management bill. That bill has not reached Parliament yet, but we have already gotten a proposed EPR, an extended producer responsibility scheme, proposed, which is anchored in the MCA. So that is not anchored in the waste management bill yet. But yes, there will be already a take on businesses being responsible for actually the amount of plastics that they are bringing into society.
Now, as we mentioned, about 2 years ago, the government quite strongly enforced a ban on the use, the manufacturing and the sale of single-use plastic bags. What are your thoughts on the success of that decision so far, and certainly how it will shine a light on how the government implements this new decision coming up next month?
Yeah, that was very successful, actually. It has reduced 80% of the problem we had 2 years ago. So I think it has been very successful, but it's also quite an easy ban to implement, because you don't really need a plastic ban or a plastic carrier bag to carry your shoppings. It's very easy to adapt to that. You have to imagine that the single-use plastic ban, it's only on 10 items. And those 10 items are the items that we are not able to dispose, apparently, in a proper way. And they will end up immediately in our ecosystem, including in food chains, human bodies, because those 10 items are found on the beaches, in the national parks, as the most littered items. So it is actually taking care of what we litter most. 75% are those 10 items. 25%, especially at the beaches, is also fishing gear. So we call that ghost fishing gear and ropes.
Well, 2 years since Kenya is just getting used to the idea of using alternatives to single-use plastics. What has been your experience getting, especially the private sector, to work with the rest of the nation in eliminating single-use plastics in the country?
Yeah, I think before we had the plastic bag ban, there was a lot of delaying in maybe private sector action. Why would you adapt when it's not necessary yet? But the ban has forced us to think differently, and we are very proactively trying to change systems and getting prepared for extended producer responsibility, especially encourage businesses to change and to innovate and to look at materials and waste as a material and keep on looking at that. And how can we recover materials so it remains of value, and we can maybe return it and recycle it back into the same product again, or we can upcycle or downcycle it.
Well, we do have to leave it there, but many thanks, Karen, for your insights there. That's Karen Boomsma. She is the Director of Sustainable Inclusive Business here in Kenya. Well, let's shift focus now to Egypt. The country is expected to record a drop of 20% in its remittance flows this year, due, of course, to COVID-19. Remittances are the second largest source of foreign currency in Egypt, and a decline could potentially affect millions in the North African nation. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Adel El Mahoui.
2019 saw remittances inflows reach $26.8 billion, a record high in Egypt's history. Earlier this year, January and February maintained this momentum and recorded about 37% increase in revenues during that period compared to 2019. 2020 was promising a new remittances record, but not anymore, thanks to the coronavirus pandemic.
Remittances from March to June are expected to drop by up to 20%. Their flow will not stabilize before September. The main reason is that some Egyptians have been laid off, especially those from the Gulf countries. There are those who are still abroad, but because of the pandemic are now in between jobs, and finally, there are those whose salaries have been cut.
The World Bank estimates a 19.7% global drop in remittances this year. Gulf countries are the biggest contributors to Egypt's remittances revenues. So combining the impact of COVID-19 with the drop in oil prices, Egypt could be on the higher end of that estimate.
I think the expected drop in remittances is one of the reasons that has pushed the government towards IMF loans. It's a precautionary move taken to cushion the economy, especially now that there are no precise projections to when this pandemic's impact will be over.
Remittances in 2019 brought $8 billion last year. Has consumed about $9 billion of Egypt's foreign reserves, so the government might not have much to do to help them out. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Ras Sidr, Egypt.
Now, like many of the norms we're used to, the age-old ritual of shareholders converging under one roof to approve the decisions of their board of directors will largely be absent this year, of course, due to COVID-19. In South Africa, the situation has forced companies to postpone their meetings indefinitely, while others are now looking to digital solutions. But there are still concerns. With the details, here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola.
Some of South Africa's best-known blue chips will be using virtual platforms for their annual general meetings. Many of these platforms allow for moderation of questions before they are submitted to the board. Shareholder activists say that this is contrary to the provisions of the Companies Act and creates the potential for abuse of these systems to avoid accountability and infringe shareholder rights.
What our Companies Act also says very clearly is that if a company is going to have a virtual-only AGM, that's fine, as long as it doesn't inhibit shareholder participation in that AGM. And it's even more specific than that. It says that participants must be able to communicate with each other concurrently without an intermediary. Those are the words of the Act.
Others suggest there's a difference between an intermediary and a moderator.
If the role of the moderator is to take questions, only questions that the board would like to hear, and don't take questions that the board makes the board uncomfortable, I think that that would certainly be wrong. So I don't think that necessarily the fact that it goes through a moderator would be in breach of the Companies Act.
The online solution to allowing everyone to participate in these AGMs is cumbersome but transparent, say shareholder activists.
Everybody's online, everyone can see everyone else or hear everyone else. And you raise your hand when you want to ask a question, and there's a queue and a list, and you listen to the question and you answer it in real time.
It's a saving grace of business and certainly professional services all over the world that people are able to do these things virtually. So to me, it's a positive development that companies are able to do that, but that should not take away from the responsibility of the company and the board to engage with their shareholders responsibly and proactively.
Company board members have the same responsibilities to their shareholders in the online and physical environments.
Again, it's all about power dynamics, and the virtual AGM gives companies a very, very powerful role in shutting things down that they don't want to be heard.
The pandemic now means that attendance at annual general meetings can happen online, but it has to be done carefully, and everyone has to get an opportunity to ask questions. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Sandton, South Africa.
And still in South Africa, the city of Cape Town has always been regarded as a top destination with a booming travel and tourism market. However, as CGTN's Renee Delcarme now reports, COVID-related cancellations, business closures, as well as loss of income could lead to the loss of an estimated 90,000 jobs in the city's tourism sector.
Most tourism businesses in South Africa's mother city are not expected to survive. According to Cape Town Tourism's impact study of lockdown and COVID-19, 70% of those surveyed in the report fear the lockdown could last anywhere from 4 to 12 months.
56% of the membership also feel that, they don't know what to do in terms of the recovery. There's no recovery plans in place. Nobody anticipated that this would happen. This is not a water crisis. It's not Ebola. It's not visas. This is something the world is going through, and it's impacting everything.
Cape Town Tourism says its industry is expected to be at the bottom of the pile when it comes to the easing of South Africa's national lockdown. So it will have to push hard for a significant slice of government's 500 billion rand COVID-19 package in order to survive.
One of the things that we have realized is that it's no longer about wanting to kickstart or restart tourism. We need to restart tourism. That impact study has indicated clearly that if we are not kickstarting and reigniting tourism, there will be no tourism left later on. And a lot of those jobs that have been built up over the last few decades will be lost, adding further pressure onto a already pressurized government system. And there needs to be a balance between the two, while making sure that safety is still a priority for everyone.
But yes, tourism has been the hardest hit. So we need to start through this period of crisis, starting to look at recovery. And we're going to, everybody talks about this new norm, and we still don't know what the new norm is. And remember, we're in this all together. It's not only the pain we're feeling, it's the pain being felt across the world.
Cape Town Tourism says the lockdown and travel bans have forced it to reimagine what tourism will look like in future. It knows it will have to rely on South Africans to reignite the domestic travel market long before international tourists return to these shores. Renadal Khan, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Now, the COVID-19 crisis has changed the way businesses around the world are being run, with lockdowns and social distancing forcing many to work from home. In Uganda, real estate developers have raised concerns about the long-term damage it could do to their sector. There, of course, are warnings of a severe drop in sales as well as occupancy rates, particularly in terms of office space. Isabel Nakeria has more on that.
Virtual workspaces are becoming the new norm, but the shift to online instead of office is having a knock-on effect. Real estate managers say occupancy in commercial buildings is dropping as businesses adapt to new ways of operating amid COVID-19, while property owners are finding they are unable to collect rents.
Especially people in the commercial environment, they are going to face some challenges because offices are going to be a bit digital. People are realizing that actually you can work from home and still be able to operate. People are going to downsize spaces in view of cutting the overheads in terms of rent.
Even as countries begin to ease lockdowns, growth in the sector could be slow. Developers foresee a drop in business expansion and new spaces to let.
This is a time when many businesses are not going to be looking to expand, but rather to sit down and practice financial resilience to see if they can ride out the storm and try and stabilize cash flows. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of letting activity.
Property agencies say many estate developers are struggling to finance bank loans, and the lockdown will stress them even more.
The underutilization of space in offices as a result of social distancing is also going to have an impact on profitability and profit margins, and eventually capital values. And it is going to stress businesses, because where you had, say, 115 or 100 members of staff, now you can only have 40.
This growth has been eminently attacked, and a massive slackdown is being witnessed ever since the outbreak of the pandemic. It's evident that the immediate impact has been a severe drop in real estate transactions. Despite the government easing on lockdown restrictions, developers remain uncertain on when business will pick up or rents paid. Economists predict hard times ahead for the sector, and it could take long for things to get back to what they were before COVID-19. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now. Still to come. U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to cut off relations with China. And it's not all gloom with COVID-19. A U.S. food chain receives an encouraging reception on its launch in Shanghai, China.
No one again he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
And just about 1:30, let's recap other headlines. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will test a plant-based tonic that the president of Madagascar claims can prevent and potentially cure COVID-19. The government of Madagascar has agreed to send samples of the herbal drink after the African Union requested that it be allowed to determine the mixture's safety and its efficacy. And Algeria has started producing rapid test kits for COVID-19. The kits have a detection time of 15 minutes. The North African state has so far reported over 5,000 infections. The immunology department in the hospital of Beni Messus, based in the capital Algiers, has developed the latest kits in partnership with Canadian and Jordanian firms. Meanwhile, the chief of the World Trade Organization says he'll step down on August 31st. This is a year before his term ends. Now, Roberto Azevedo's early departure will come at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed the global economy as well as international trade into turmoil, facing downturns not seen since the Great Depression. Azevedo says he made the decision for personal reasons. And finally, COVID-19 cases continue to surge in the U.S. The world's biggest economy has reported more than 1.4 million infections and over 85,000 deaths. Health authorities have also issued an alert over a rare inflammatory disease in children believed to be linked to the virus. Symptoms include fever, rash, and organ inflammation. The state of New York has reported 102 such cases, which doctors say can infect children up to 16 years old. And that is a look at today's top headlines. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has escalated his rhetoric towards China over the pandemic. In a TV interview, the U.S. leader threatened to cut off the entire relationship with Beijing, claiming it will save Washington about $500 billion US. He also repeated unproven allegations about the origins of the coronavirus. But a former White House official in the Trump administration is now blaming the U.S. leader for the severity of the crisis. CGTN White House correspondent Nathan King has more.
If nothing else, over the last...
The U.S. president continues to point the finger over COVID-19 at China in a TV interview.
They should have never let this happen.
And at the Obama administration during a visit to a medical supply company in Pennsylvania.
We were left virtually none.
The president is vowing that from now on the U.S. will manufacture as much of its medical supplies as possible.
Every day you prove that American workers are truly the best in the world, and that's what they are. And we're showing that now. We're starting to make more and more product in the United States.
But back in Washington, the finger was being firmly pointed at the president and his team. Rick Bright, until recently an official in the Trump administration, said he was moved from his job as director of the U.S. Vaccine Agency after he pushed back against the use of untested medicines the president was pushing. Testifying to the U.S. Congress, Bright painted a picture of an administration in denial, slow to react and torn by infighting.
I believe we could have done better. I believe there are critical steps that we did not take in time. And those urges, those alarms were not responded to with action.
Bright also warned that if the US government doesn't act more quickly, then the winter of 2020 could be the darkest in modern history. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is dismissing his allegations and continues to focus on reopening the US economy. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
Meanwhile, the United States is again extending the reprieve for Chinese tech giant Huawei to buy from U.S. tech companies to August 13th. That is the fourth extension of the original 90-day reprieve. On Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump also extended the executive order which bars U.S. companies from working with or using telecoms equipment made by firms that the White House considers to be a national security risk. The presidential order was first signed on May 2019. It effectively cuts companies like Huawei out of the U.S. market while also preventing it from working with U.S. companies like Google. Now, China says its economy is recovering but still faces many challenges as COVID-19 spreads globally. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the country's value-added industrial output was up nearly 4% year-on-year in April. The job market remained generally stable, with the urban unemployment rate just 0.1% higher than in March. Consumer spending recovered somewhat, with a 7.5% year-on-year fall last month. That's compared with a drop of nearly 16% back in March. In the meantime, Chinese officials say that the country's foreign trade will face continued pressure in the second quarter from, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. That's despite a slight upturn in the numbers. CGTN's Make with the details.
Official data on Friday show a year-on-year increase of 8.2% of China's commodity export in April. But spokesperson from China's statistics authorities warns repeatedly at a press conference not to be overly optimistic about trade recovery. since producer price index for April has decreased by 3.1%, doubling February's drop in percentage points.
Structurally speaking, the down global crude markets will affect oil-related industries, which then hurts the overall economic indicators.
When asked whether China is capable of guaranteeing a 6% GDP growth in 2020, the official didn't answer directly but said it's hard for one country to maintain its status while the world economy is in contraction.
China's exports are facing great challenges. Although there was a positive year-on-year growth of 8.2% in April, I don't think we should be overly positive of the economic prospect in the near future. We need to focus on our economic strength, dig up consumption potential, and support small-sized businesses in order to weather through the pandemic.
Global economic institutes have painted a gloomy picture for 2020's economic growth, despite many countries setting forward plans to lift lockdowns and reopen trades.
But the coronavirus crisis raises longer-term concerns as well. The record shows that deeper and longer recessions can leave behind lasting damage to the productive capacity of the economy. We are seeing a severe decline in economic activity, and already the job gains of the last decade have been erased.
Powell's two colleagues, U.S. Dallas and Minneapolis Federal Reserve Presidents Robert Kaplan and Neil Kashkari, were more direct in saying that an earlier predicted V-shaped recovery, where the big downturn is matched by a violent upswing, is highly unlikely. Ma Ke, CGTN, Beijing.
And elsewhere, the ongoing COVID-19 chaos has tipped Germany into a recession. Europe's top economy shrank by 2.2% in the first 3 months of this year. That is the biggest quarterly fall since 2009, when the country was engulfed in the global financial crisis. Now, the figures from the Federal Statistics Office come as Germany takes its first tentative steps to exit lockdown. Shops are now reopening, pupils will gradually return to class, and football is restarting behind closed doors. At the same time, figures for the final 3 months of 2019 were revised to show a contraction of 0.1%. That means Germany's GDP growth has been negative for 2 successive quarters, the technical definition of a recession.
The lockdown agreed by the federal and state governments to contain the coronavirus pandemic has brought the German economy to a standstill in large parts since mid-March. Although the spread of the coronavirus didn't significantly affect economic performance in January and February, the effects of the pandemic are already severe for the entire quarter of 2020.
Well, let's head to Australia now. The country is easing restrictions across the nation as the spread of COVID-19 continues to slow down there. It's also getting a better idea of the impact those restrictions are having on its economy. CGTN's Greg Navarro has more from Sydney.
All states and territories across Australia are in the midst of slowly easing restrictions put in place to slow the spread of coronavirus, and New South Wales here is no different. That includes allowing restaurants, cafes and pubs to serve customers inside their businesses on a limited basis, and allowing larger gatherings of up to 10 people, even opening up playgrounds and swimming pools. That is certainly welcome news for many businesses that have been forced to close or scale back over the last few months. All of this is a sign of the impact those restrictions are having on slowing the spread of the virus. In fact, many states have reported employment figures for April show almost 600,000 people lost their jobs and more than 6 million saving government
eyes have proven immune to the COVID-19 pandemic. That is as the popular fried chicken chain opened its first ever restaurant in Shanghai to long lines of customers on a Friday, with plans to build 1,500 more branches. CGTN's Wule sat down with the CEO of Popeyes China.
We know Popeyes was founded in 1972, almost 48 years later. Why did you choose to enter Chinese market at this moment? And what is your long-term expansion strategy in China?
The decision to come to China happened last year. It's been a long-term investment decision. We announced plans for the next 10 years. Yeah, the epidemic has been an unfortunate event. Originally, we planned to open this restaurant in March this year. We had to adapt to that. Fortunately, I think China did an amazing job. The recovery here has been steady, getting better every day and very fast. And that gave us the confidence to resume our plan.
How many more stores are you going to open in China?
The plan is to open 1,500 restaurants within the next 10 years. Despite the circumstances, most recently this plan is still there. It hasn't changed. We'll start in Shanghai, as this is the very first flagship we're opening today, and many more will come after that.
There are already many global fried chicken brands like KFC or McDonald's in China. How do you plan to compete with them?
And although there are so many competitors, we do believe there's still a lot of space. First, because the industry is still growing a lot for Western QSR chain players. It will definitely grow. And we do believe we bring a special flavor. So we bring a Louisiana heritage. It's a mix of different cuisines and different cultures. And of course, as we understand our consumers better, engage with them, there will be a work stream of localizing or creating a product line that fits the Chinese consumers more. So this will be a constant work stream as we sail through this journey.
Recently, other international retailers like Walmart or Starbucks also planning more investment in China. What opportunities have you seen in the Chinese consumer arena?
There is still a lot of place to grow. How do you adapt your restaurant footprint when delivery becomes a more relevant channel? And then you have all the digital ecosystem that I would say China is the most advanced digital ecosystem in the world right now, not only on payments, but on loyalty and CRM and all of that. So it talks a lot with this target group that you mentioned, the younger generation that wants something new, wants something authentic. So we'll believe they'll be happy to have us, and we'll be happy to serve them.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at how commodity markets performed today. Brent crude climbed almost 3%. Prices are finding some support as several OPEC nations, including Saudi Arabia, say they will cut output more than originally pledged. Producers in the US and Canada have also cut production by about 1.7 million barrels per day, much faster than expected. Gold prices, on the other hand, rose today but traded below a 3-week high, which of course it reached in the previous session. Gold has gained about 1.8% so far this week, which could be its biggest in about 3 weeks. It has been supported by signs of prolonged economic weakness and of course tensions between the US and China. Well, let's head into a short break now. Coming up. A DJ in a South African township changes tune from online entertainment to a food drive.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, millions of Nigerian startups are at risk of dying as COVID-19 continues to spread across the nation. CGTN's Deji Badmus takes up the story of one entrepreneurship network that is helping innovative solutions get through this pandemic crisis.
Over 100 startups used to call this place home. Ventures Park in the heart of Abuja is a co-working space that attracted over 5,000 visitors monthly. But since the COVID-19 outbreak in the country and the subsequent restriction of movement imposed by the government, the buildings have become deserted. It's been like this for over 5 weeks now. Some of the startups here had only just been finding their feet when the pandemic hit. There are fears some may not make it back. But the head of Ventures Park is doing all she can to continue to provide support to the startups virtually to enable them wade through this difficult period.
It's a tough time for a lot of companies, and being resilient is not easy. Some companies, in fact, I saw statistics that showed that over 80% of startups are going to die within this period. It's a horrible figure, it's a horrible number, and we're trying our best to make sure that it's not so with the support that we're giving the founders. We were trying to advocate for policies and for things that are going to help them and support them through this. But the truth is that some companies will not survive this period.
And it's not just the startups that operate out of its facility that have been badly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. VentureSpark itself has also been seriously affected as well.
Being locked down means that it's been difficult for us to earn as a business. We are a business as well, right? And our team, they've had to work remotely. And it's not easy staying productive, staying sane, knowing what's happening out there, being so unsure of what tomorrow is going to be.
But while their business might be taking a beating, Oguchi and her team at VentureSpark have their sights focused on the startup under their umbrella. They provide them with specialized support, and they are determined that the startups survive this period.
And in doing that, we've launched a few initiatives which have really been impactful. One is our business unusual session that we started, which we bring experts from all over the world who take sessions with our community to educate them on ways they can stay resilient, ways they can manage the crisis. And we also launched something called the COVID Innovation Challenge, which was our way to support the government and to create great ideas and initiatives and new startups that are able to help combat the COVID challenge that we're facing in the country.
Approximately 170 startups operated from VentureSpark pre-COVID-19. It would be a miracle if all of them make it back after the pandemic. But one thing is certain, COVID-19 would give birth to new startups. At least that would be some consolation for businesses like VentureSpark. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Abuja.
Now in South Africa, a lockdown is now entering its 8th week, and of course it continues to drastically affect the lives of millions who live in informal settlements across the country. Well, CGTN's Sumitra Naidu visited a township just outside Pretoria to see what a well-known DJ there is doing to help his community.
South Africa's DJ Jazzy D hosts a popular nighttime show on a music radio station in Johannesburg. Confined to his home under lockdown, Jazzy D turned his talents to Facebook, entertaining fans by live streaming mixes from his living room. But with COVID-19 restrictions taking its toll on people's livelihoods and hunger becoming a fast-growing problem in the neighborhoods the DJ was raised in, listeners' requests turned from songs to survival.
I started getting messages on social media from members within these communities asking me to assist them with just a loaf of bread.
I just need 300. If you can't give me 300 baked beans, maybe give me 150 and I'll see if I can buy the others from someone else.
So DJ Jazzy D decided to change his tune and start a food drive. He put out a call to his followers of his virtual lockdown parties.
Come on guys, let's make a difference.
And 10 minutes later, I had a balance of just over 60 grand in my account, and I was stumped.
The donations, equivalent to more than $3,000 was just the beginning.
It took us 1 week to deliver food to over 700 families.
Jazzy D and his team have done amazing work over the last few weeks. They've managed to feed and get groceries to up to 5,000 families. But he is running out of money and he will need to get some more funding in order to keep this initiative sustainable.
I am very aware of the poverty that exists in our community. And when I heard about Jazzy's project, I said to my husband, we need to become part of this. At my age, it's a very big risk. Yes, my children are not happy with what I'm doing. But as I've said earlier, we just feel we need to be a part of this.
Jazzy D's initiative also got the attention of the Blue Bulls. The local South African rugby team donated over 400 of these buckets to the cause. Jazzy D is not making any money for himself. Instead, he's using his talents to give back to his hometown of Eersterus, the township that helped him find his heartbeat.
Gavin and Sam Alexander, thank you for 1,200 rand.
Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
And to Uganda now, where a snail farmer has started using slime in order to make cosmetic products. Snail creams are becoming big business in Asian nations, where they're widely believed to slow down wrinkling and, of course, heal acne. Now, the global snail cream market is expected to reach about $700 million by 2025. That is according to the Coherent Market Insights. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria tells us more.
A slimy way to nourish the skin. Lucy Shilingi is extracting slime from her snails to make cosmetic products. Lucy got into snail business after learning about it from West Africa, where snail farming is popular.
The different people I used to, especially women and youth, whom I used to visit in their homes to see their farms of snails. And also by the roadside, you see many more young people and women selling snails on trays, in calabashes. I really got interested in it.
With a startup capital from a microfinance support center of $78,000, Lucy is now setting up a cosmetic production line. For now, production of slime is still at small scale, but once the slime extractor is purchased, it will increase.
I put them in the funnel and just disturb them. Move the tunnel or the funnel around many times. They'll be irritated and they will release slime.
She's already offering a few samples of her cosmetic products like soap and lotions. And she's producing a range of fragrances that she expects will hit the market by mid-year. Over 35,000 snails are in these pens, but Lucy says these are still not enough to produce the amount of slime she would need to produce cosmetics, since she intends to go into mass production. She says she'll have to buy more slime from snail farmers outside this place. Snail farming is picking up in Uganda, but the meat is not eaten here. Still, those involved in snail farming say there is a large market among foreign expatriates and that it's not labor or capital intensive.
Especially when it comes to feeding, it doesn't need much. Like here, I've got my fruits, this green pasture. So it was so much conducive to me. At the end of the day, I just said, let me start up.
Lucy says expanding the snail products market beyond food is more lucrative.
I started reading much more. Then I asked myself, why is it that we are getting all these value addition products, especially for the cosmetics? You know, like oils, creams, lotions, from Korea, from South Korea, from China, and they are all here, and they're still snails products.
Lucy's cosmetic company may be growing at a snail's pace now, but in the long run, she says her snails will produce a profitable slime for her products. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.